Was wrong about one thing my whole life. I thought the worst betrayal would come from someone I trusted. Turns out it came from the woman who used to braid my hair before school. My name is Hannah Mercer. I was 31 when my own mother stood on her porch in Bend, Oregon, and told me I wasn't her daughter anymore. It was a Tuesday in February, the kind of cold that gets inside your coat and stays there. My 6-year-old son Caleb was in the back seat of my Honda Civic, and he had a fever of 1 and 2. I had $312 in my checking account, and the only place I had left to go was the woman who told me, when I was 16 and crying about a boyfriend, that family was the one thing nobody could take from you. She took it from me in under 4 minutes. I timed it later, replaying it in my head. Let me back up. I started Mercer Architecture 8 years ago out of a converted garage in Northeast Portland. Just me and a drafting table and a laptop with a cracked screen. My specialty was residential remodels, mid-century homes that needed someone who actually understood how to honor the bones of a building instead of gutting it. By year 3, I had 2 employees. By year 5, I had 8, an office in the Pearl District, and a waiting list that ran 6 months out. By year 7, I was getting written up in Dwell magazine and turning down work. That's when my older sister Vanessa came back into my life. Vanessa is 2 years older than me, and she had spent most of her 20s bouncing between MLM schemes and what she liked to call consulting. She'd moved to Phoenix for a man, then to Denver for another one, then back to Bend when our dad got sick in 2021. After he passed, she stayed to take care of Mom. That's how she put it. Take care of Mom. Mom was 64, healthy, ran a yarn shop part-time, and did not need taking care of. But Vanessa needed a place to live, and our mother had always had a soft spot for her firstborn. So when Vanessa called me one Sunday in the spring of 2024 and asked if I'd consider letting her come on as office manager at Mercer Architecture, I said yes. I said yes because she was my sister. I said yes because Mom had been asking me to help your sister get back on her feet. I said yes because, deep down, some childish part of me still wanted Vanessa to look at me and see something other than the little sister she used to lock out of her bedroom. I should have said no. For the first 6 months, it was fine. She handled invoicing, scheduling, vendor calls. She was good with clients on the phone. She had a way of making people feel important. I gave her a salary that was honestly more than the role warranted. I told myself I was investing in family. In November, my bookkeeper, Marcy, who'd been with me since year 2, came into my office and shut the door behind her. She sat down across from me and slid a manila folder across the desk. I don't want to be the one telling you this, she said, but I'd want someone to tell me. I opened the folder. There were printouts of invoices, statements, and a handful of email screenshots. Over the course of 7 months, somebody had been routing payments from 3 of our biggest clients into an LLC called Cascade Design Group. The LLC was registered in Oregon. The registered agent was my sister. I sat there with my hand over my mouth for a long time. I didn't cry. I think I was too stunned to cry. Marcy reached across the desk and took my other hand and just held it. How much? I finally said. $147,000, she said. Give or take. That I can prove. I confronted Vanessa that same night. I drove out to Bend, 3 hours through dark pine forests, rehearsing what I'd say. I'd be calm. I'd be fair. I'd give her a chance to explain. Maybe she had a gambling problem. Maybe she was in trouble with someone. I told myself I'd help her if she just told me the truth. I pulled into Mom's driveway around 9. Vanessa was inside, on the couch, drinking white wine and watching some reality show with our mother. I asked if we could talk in the kitchen. I laid out the folder. I laid out everything Marcy had shown me. I told her I knew about Cascade Design Group. I told her I wasn't going to the police if she'd just sit down with me and a lawyer and figure out a repayment plan. I told her I loved her. She looked at me and I watched something change in her face. It was like a curtain coming down. You always thought you were better than me, she said. That was her response. Not denial, not an apology, just that. Then she walked out of the kitchen, sat back down next to our mother on the couch, and started crying. She told Mom I was accusing her of stealing. She said I'd been jealous of her my whole life, She said I'd been looking for a reason to push her out of the company because I couldn't stand seeing her succeed. My mother looked at me like I just walked in off the street. "Hannah," she said, "how could you say something like that to your sister?" I tried to show her the folder. I really did. I held it out and I said, "Mom, please, just look. I'm not making this up." She didn't even glance at it. "I think you should go," she said. "I think you need to think very hard about what kind of person you want to be." I drove home that night and I don't remember most of the drive. I remember pulling into my driveway and sitting in the car for an hour because I couldn't make myself walk inside and explain to my husband what had just happened. Except my husband wasn't there. Daniel had left 6 months earlier. He told me he felt invisible next to my career, and he wasn't wrong. And I'd been so consumed with growing the firm that I'd let our marriage starve. He took a teaching job in Flagstaff. We agreed Caleb would stay with me during the school year. That part still felt like a wound. So it was just me and Caleb in the house, and the next morning I got up and made him pancakes and dropped him at first grade, and I went into the office and I started the process of trying to claw my company back from the brink. Here's what I didn't know yet. Vanessa, while she was embezzling, had also been doing something cleverer and more poisonous. She'd been emailing our clients, pretending to be me, telling them about delays, about quality concerns, about cost overruns that didn't exist. She'd been salting the earth. By the time I figured out the scope of it, 3 of my biggest contracts had walked. 2 more were threatening to. My business insurance carrier was asking questions. The bank pulled my line of credit. I had to lay off 5 of my 8 employees in the space of 2 weeks. I sat in my car after telling Marcy I couldn't keep her on, and I sobbed so hard I threw up into a Starbucks cup. But the worst was still coming. My mother and Vanessa, between them, had managed to convince half of our extended family that I was the villain. Vanessa told them I'd accused her of theft to get out of paying her a fair severance. She told them I'd had a breakdown. She told them I was unstable, and that's why Daniel had left, and that's why she was so worried about Caleb. That last part, that's the one that should have warned me. In January, I got a letter from an attorney in Eugene. My mother was petitioning for emergency grandparent visitation rights. The letter cited concerns about my emotional state and my ability to provide a stable environment. It mentioned that I had been let go from my own company, which was not true, and that I was facing financial collapse, which was true, but not because of anything I'd done. I called my mother. She didn't answer. I called Vanessa. She didn't answer either. I drove out to Bend the next weekend with Caleb in the back seat. I told him we were going to visit Grandma. He was excited. He'd brought a drawing he'd made of the 2 of them at the beach. She wouldn't open the door. I stood on her porch, and I knocked, and I called her name, and I told her Caleb was in the car. I could see her through the kitchen window. She saw me too. Vanessa was standing behind her. They were just standing there in the kitchen, watching me. After a few minutes, my mother walked to the door, but she didn't open it. She talked through the glass. "Hannah, I need you to leave. Mom, please. Caleb's in the car. He hasn't seen you in months. You should have thought about Caleb before you started lying about your sister. Don't come back here. You're not welcome. As far as I'm concerned, I have 1 daughter. I want to be honest with you about something." In that moment, what hurt the most wasn't the rejection. The rejection I could almost understand. People believe what they want to believe. What hurt was Vanessa standing behind her, smiling. Just a small, private smile. The same smile she used to give me when she stole my Halloween candy and watched me get blamed for losing it. I walked back to the car. Caleb asked me why Grandma didn't come out. I told him she wasn't feeling well. He held his drawing in his lap the whole way home. 3 weeks later, my house went into foreclosure. The same week, Caleb spiked a fever that wouldn't break. We were already past the eviction date. I had been couch surfing at my friend Priya's place, but Priya had a baby on the way and her in-laws coming to stay, and I couldn't keep imposing. I'd been looking at extended stay motels, but every dollar mattered and the math wasn't working. So when Caleb's fever climbed past 103 on a Thursday night and the urgent care said it sounded like pneumonia and we needed to go to the ER, I drove him to St. Luke's in Beaverton with most of my belongings in the trunk of the car. They were kind at first. The triage nurse was a woman in her 50s named Denise, who I'll think about for the rest of my life. She got Caleb back fast. They did chest x-rays, they started him on IV antibiotics and fluids. They confirmed walking pneumonia, said he'd need monitoring overnight and possibly a couple of days. Then the financial counselor came down. She was apologetic, she was professional. She told me that because I'd lost my employer-sponsored insurance and was between coverage, and because my recent COBRA application was still pending review, the hospital could stabilize Caleb and continue emergency treatment, but for an extended inpatient stay. They'd need a payment plan in place or proof of pending coverage. She handed me paperwork for charity care, which she said took 30 to 60 days to process. She told me about Oregon Health Plan, which I could apply for, but the application would take time. She told me very gently that they wouldn't turn us away, but that I needed to understand the financial reality. I understood the financial reality just fine. By 11 the next morning, Caleb was stable enough to be discharged with oral antibiotics, a nebulizer prescription, and instructions to follow up in 3 days. The doctor said he'd be okay. He said it like a man who didn't know where we were going. I sat in the parking garage of St. Me, Luke's with Caleb, buckled into his booster seat, and I tried to think of one person I could call. My mother was not an option. Vanessa was not an option. Daniel was teaching middle school and renting a 1-bedroom in Flagstaff. He'd take Caleb if I asked. He'd take Caleb if I asked. He'd take him in a heartbeat, but I would have to put my son on a plane and let him go. And I would be the mother who lost everything, and I didn't know if I could survive that. I didn't know if Caleb could survive that. I had a few friends. Priya, a couple of former colleagues, but everyone had their own lives, their own walls closing in, their own babies coming. I had been the friend who hosted. I had been the friend who paid for dinner. I did not know how to be the friend who needed help. So I drove. I drove to a Target parking lot in Hillsboro because I knew they didn't tow overnight. I made a bed for Caleb in the back seat with the blanket from his bedroom. I read to him from a library book. I told him this was an adventure. He was 6. He believed me mostly. We slept in that car for 9 nights. I want you to understand something. When you sleep in a car with a sick child in February in Oregon, you don't sleep. You doze. You wake up every 20 minutes to make sure he's breathing. You run the engine for warmth and then turn it off because gas costs money. You wash up in Target bathrooms. You use the Wi-Fi at the McDonald's across the parking lot to apply for jobs. You eat dollar menu cheeseburgers and pretend they're delicious so your kid doesn't worry. On the 7th night, Caleb started running a fever again. The antibiotics weren't holding. I sat in the driver's seat at 2 a.m. with my forehead pressed against the steering wheel, and I prayed for the first time since I was a kid. I don't even know to who. I just prayed. On the 9th morning, I was sitting in the McDonald's trying to draft an email to a former client when a man at the next table cleared his throat. He was maybe 65. White hair, neat beard, a Patagonia jacket that had seen somewhere. He had a coffee and a newspaper, which I remember thinking was old-fashioned. Who reads a newspaper anymore? Forgive me, he said. But are you Hannah Mercer? I almost lied. I genuinely considered lying. But I was too tired. Yes, I thought so. I'm Walter Honig. You designed an addition for my house in Lake Oswego in 2019. The sunroom off the back with the cedar beams. I remembered. Of course I remembered. He had been a quiet client. He'd let me make every aesthetic call. He'd cried when he saw the finished room because his wife, who'd had MS, had wanted that sunroom for years and didn't live to see it. He'd hugged me at the final walkthrough, and I cried with him. Mr. Honig, I said, I'm so sorry. I'm not, Walter. Please. Are you all right? You don't look all right. And that was when I broke. I don't know why, after holding it together for months, it was a stranger who undid me. I sat in that McDonald's booth at 8 in the morning and I cried so hard I couldn't speak. He pushed napkins across the table. He didn't say anything. He just waited. When I could finally talk, I told him. I told him about Vanessa. I told him about my mother. I told him about Caleb. I told him about the car. I told him about the foreclosure. Walter listened without interrupting. When I was done, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Where is your son right now?" "He's in the car. He's still sleeping. He has pneumonia." "Can I see him?" I don't know what made me trust him. Maybe it was the way he'd sat in his finished sunroom and wept for his wife. Maybe it was that I had nothing left to lose. I took him out to the car. Caleb was curled up in the back seat in his pajamas, flushed and damp. Walter looked at him for a long time. Then he turned to me. "I'm going to make a few calls," he said. "I would like for you and your son to come with me. I have a guest house at my home. It's empty. You can stay there as long as you need to. I am going to call my doctor and have him see Caleb today. I am going to call my attorney about the rest of it. I want you to understand that there are no strings. I do not want anything from you. I have more money than I will ever spend, and I've not been able to do anything useful with it since my wife died. Please, let me be useful." "I want to tell you," I argued. "I want to tell you I had pride. I didn't." I just nodded, and I followed him in my car back to a stone house in Lake Oswego, the kind of house I used to drive past as a kid and wonder who lived inside. The guest house was not really a guest house. It was a 2-bedroom cottage with radiant floor heating and a real kitchen and a window seat overlooking a garden that was still asleep for the winter. There were fresh sheets on the beds within an hour. Walter's housekeeper, a Vietnamese woman named Tien, who I would later love like an aunt, made Caleb a bowl of pho and sat with him while he ate it, telling him in the gentlest voice that he needed to drink the broth. All of the broth, because that was the medicine. By that evening, a pediatrician named Dr. Rosenfeld had been to the cottage. Caleb was on a different antibiotic, a stronger one, and a real nebulizer. By morning, his fever had broken. I slept 14 hours that first night. I had not slept 14 hours since Caleb was born. Walter did exactly what he said he would do. He introduced me to his attorney, a woman named Patricia Lynn who specialized in corporate fraud. Patricia took one look at the documentation Marcy had compiled, made a single phone call to a forensic accountant she'd worked with before, and told me, "We're going to get your company back, and then we're going to get a great deal more than that." For the next 4 months, I lived in that cottage and rebuilt my life one careful brick at a time. I won't pretend it was a montage. Some days I cried for hours. Some days I cried for hours. Some days I called Priya and told her I didn't know how to keep going. Caleb had nightmares for weeks. He'd wake up in his new bed and not know where he was. I'd crawl in next to him and tell him the names of all the things in the room until he fell back asleep. But other days, real progress happened. Patricia had Cascade Design Group dissolved within 6 weeks. The forensic accountant traced an additional $72,000 in fraud, bringing the total to $219,000. 2 of the clients who'd left Mercer Architecture came back when Patricia's office sent them documentation of what had actually happened. One of them, a developer building a boutique hotel in Hood River, doubled his original contract as a kind of apology. Walter, on his own, made some calls. I don't know exactly what he said or to whom, but within 8 weeks, I had a contract to design a new wing for the Oregon Children's Museum. I had 2 private residential commissions from people whose names I had only ever seen on buildings. I had, against every odd, a future again. In May, I moved out of Walter's guest house. I bought a small Craftsman in Selwood in cash with the settlement money from the civil suit Patricia filed against Vanessa. The criminal case was its own track. I did press charges. I had to. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the fact that if I didn't, she would do it again, to somebody else. Somebody who didn't have a Walter. Vanessa pled out. She got 18 months plus restitution that she will be paying for the rest of her working life. My mother sent me one letter during all of this asking me to drop the charges. She said it would destroy our family. She didn't ask about Caleb. The letter didn't mention him at all. I didn't write back. In August, I went to Bend. I hadn't planned to. I had a meeting with a client and sisters, and I had 2 hours to kill before my drive home, and I found myself in the parking lot of my mother's yarn shop without remembering deciding to drive there. I sat in the car for a long time. I thought about leaving. Then I went in. The bell over the door rang. My mother was at the counter helping a woman pick out skeins for a baby blanket. She looked up. Her hand went to her chest. The customer left. The shop was empty. It was just the two of us surrounded by wool. "Hannah," she said. "Hi, Mom." For 5 seconds, she didn't say anything. 5 seconds is a long time when you're standing in a room with someone who chose your sister over you and your sick grandson. She looked at me and I watched her face do a complicated thing. I watched her try to find the version of this conversation where she came out the hero. "I thought you might come, did you? I heard about the lawsuit, about Vanessa. I didn't know. I didn't know about any of it. You have to believe me." "Mom," I said, I showed you the folder. "In November, I sat in your kitchen and I begged you to look at the folder. Hannah, you didn't look." She started crying. Real crying, not Vanessa crying. I watched her cry and I waited to feel what I thought I would feel. The vindication, the hardness softening. I waited for the moment in the story where the mother apologizes and the daughter takes her hand and says, "We can start over." It didn't come. What I felt instead was something quieter. I felt the absence of her. I felt all the years I had spent trying to be the daughter she would choose. And I felt how those years were just gone and I wasn't going to get them back. And I wasn't going to try to earn them back either. "I'm not here to forgive you," I said. "I'm here to tell you that I have a son. He's 7 now. He had pneumonia in February. We slept in a car for 9 nights. He has nightmares. He has nightmares. He asks about his grandma sometimes and I don't know what to tell him. I want to see him, please. I want to make it right. You don't get to see him. Hannah, please. You petitioned the court for grandparent rights. You told a judge I was unstable. You did that while I was sleeping in a parking lot. You did that while my son had 103 fever in the back of my car. So no, you don't get to see him. Maybe someday. Maybe not. But not because of what you want. Because of what's good for him." She put her hands flat on the counter. She didn't say anything. "Vanessa's not going to take care of you," I said. "When you get older, when you need someone, she's going to take whatever's left and disappear. I want you to know that I know that. And I want you to know that I would have. I would have taken care of you. I would have done it gladly. That was the daughter you threw away." I left. I didn't slam the door. I just walked out and the little bell rang, and I drove the 3 hours home and Caleb was waiting for me at Priya's with a drawing of our new house. I framed a drawing of our new house at Mercer Architecture, which has 9 employees again and a 6-month waiting list. Walter comes for dinner once a month. He calls Caleb the architect's apprentice. Caleb calls him Grandpa Walter, and Walter cried the first time he said it. And so did I. I'm 32 now. I'm not the same woman who stood on her mother's porch in February. That woman is gone and I don't miss her because she believed something that wasn't true. She believed that the people who shared her blood would catch her when she fell. The people who actually caught me were a triage nurse named Denise, a housekeeper named Tien, a stranger reading a newspaper in a McDonald's, a bookkeeper who slid a folder across my desk, a lawyer who took my case before she'd been paid $1, an ex-husband who showed up at the hospital the moment I finally called him and stayed for a week, and a 6-year-old boy who held my hand through 9 nights in a car and told me, on the last morning, that he wasn't scared because his mom was the bravest person he knew. Blood gave me a family. Choice gave me a home. If you're sitting somewhere right now wondering whether the people who are supposed to love you ever actually did, I want you to hear me. You are not crazy. You are not ungrateful. You are not the problem. Sometimes the people who raised you were just the first strangers you ever met. And sometimes the family you build is the only family that was ever going to be real. I learned that the hard way. I learned it sleeping in a Honda Civic in a Target parking lot with my son's hand wrapped around my finger. But I learned it, and I'm telling you, so maybe you don't have to. I think about that February for a long time after. Not the cold, not even the fear. What I think about is the chain of small choices that led me there, and the chain of small choices that led me out. When my sister Vanessa decided to start routing money into a shell company, she wasn't thinking about a 6-year-old boy with pneumonia sleeping in a Honda Civic. She was thinking about herself. That's how these things always start. One small dishonesty, then a bigger one, then a story you tell yourself to make it all okay. My mother chose her too, the same way. Not in one big moment, but in 100 small ones over 40 years. Every time she made excuses for Vanessa and asked more of me. Cause and effect. By the time February came, the foundation had already been laid. I just didn't see it. But the other chain was being built at the same time. I didn't know it then either. When I treated Walter Honig with care 5 years before I needed him, when I sat in his sunroom and cried with him about his wife, I wasn't building a safety net. I was just being decent. When I paid Marcy a fair wage and treated her like a partner instead of an employee, I wasn't planning ahead. When I held Caleb's hand through those 9 nights and told him this was an adventure, I wasn't being brave. I was just doing the next right thing because there was nothing else to do. And here's what I learned. The next right thing is the only thing. You don't get to control the outcome. You don't get to know which day a stranger will recognize you in a McDonald's or which folder a bookkeeper will slide across your desk. You only get to choose, in the moment in front of you, what kind of person you're going to be. Strong or scared, honest or convenient, present or absent. And you make that choice 1,000 times and one day you look up and the choices have become your life. I'm not telling you to forgive the people who hurt you. I haven't forgiven my mother, and I may never. I'm telling you that the work of becoming someone worth catching is your work, and it has to happen before the fall. You build your character in the quiet years so it can hold you up in the loud ones. Caleb is 7 now. He's healthy. He still has a drawing of his grandma in a shoebox under his bed, and I don't take it from him because that grief is his to carry in his own time. But he also knows the names of the people who showed up. Walter, Tien, Denise, Priya. And he knows that family is something you build with your hands, every single day out of small choices nobody sees until they matter. That's what I want him to learn from all of this. Not the betrayal. The building.